So as I've been growing my own company this year, this is what puzzles me the most. If you run your own company or if you are a service provider, I bet you have horror stories about bad customers, bad clients. This is actually how I learned how to run my company better. Lessons learned from that client, the worst client I ever had, from seeing what they did and knowing what not to do. Hi, my name is Laura Forsick. I am the executive director of boutique space consulting firm Astrolytical. As I've been growing my company this year very intentionally, I'm actually quite puzzled at how this company was run, how this company managed to be as successful as it was, which is moderately successful, with such poor inner workings. It's about me learning from a bad experience what not to do so that I could make my company as successful as it can be. And hopefully you can also make your businesses as successful as they can be. One thing that is most surprising to me was the lack of training. This company, by the way, was not new. This company had been around a couple of decades, so they were well established. They completely lacked training. Standard operating procedures, SOPs, documentation that explains how the business operates, how the business does certain things. Every company has its own way of doing things. Every company has its own priorities or timelines. They did not have deadlines. They told me a deadline, but that was actually the publication date. That was not actually the deadline of when they wanted me to accomplish certain things. And this was only my second client, by the way. So at that point, I hadn't yet known that I needed to ask for specific milestone deadlines and deliverable deadlines. So that was my lack of knowledge, but they should have known because they were not a new company. Because what happened was we got to a few days before the publication deadline, a week before the publication deadline. I don't remember anymore. And they were like, hey, where's the document? And I'm like, you don't need it for another week. That led to a lot of initial confusion, and also both parties look bad when you don't clearly communicate deadlines. Same thing with guidelines. So they did not have any written guidelines whatsoever. They had a specific document length that they expected the deliverable to be, and they told me one thing, but actually they meant it to be a little longer because there were certain buffers and page numbers and whatever, and I don't really know why it mattered to this company so much, the exact length of the document, but they did not communicate it. And so how can I be able to mind read and know that page length was something that was very important to them? And there were no procedures about how they wanted me to go about this. They pretty much said, you're an expert, you do it, which yes, my company is really good at that right now, but we still need to understand what the client expects. If the client is expecting one thing and we as an expert entity go ahead and produce something that they are not completely expecting, then there's going to be a lot of iterations, which goes back to deadlines. If there's going to be iterations between the work that my company does and the work that the client is expecting, then they need to properly communicate their timeline. What I truly want you to take away from this is you need to have clear scope of work before you begin a project. You need to be able to clearly communicate not just the scope of work, but also the expectations that go along with the scope of work. And you need to be willing to charge extra when you go above and beyond. If there is extra work, don't think that you need to take that on for free. Stand your ground. You agreed for one thing at one price and have amendments to that contract for additional work or for rush delivery or for whatever else you might have to charge for. Also, as a business, it is your responsibility to train the people who work with you. I highly recommend standard operating procedures. Some people have them in document form. Becoming more popular is having them in video form or recording your screen as you do something. Another thing is software. This particular client wanted me to work with a specific type of software that had an add-on that is not standard, and they had never trained me on it. And I ran into significant IT problems that they did not necessarily want to help me with. Now I want to talk about you. First off, you are a professional. You deserve to be treated with respect, and you need to set boundaries. If someone, whether that's a client, a customer, a partner, it really doesn't matter who they are. If someone is not treating you with respect, or if someone is exploiting you, you really need to step up. So this particular client, they exploited me, and it was my own fault because I let them exploit me. I did not set firm boundaries. And I knew from the start that I made a mistake with the contract. It was essentially unlimited time for a flat fee, and they could ask much, much more of me than initially proposed. So what happened was, because they kept asking more and more and more and more of me, I kept giving and giving and going above and beyond what I had originally signed up for, and they just did not seem to care. In fact, they started treating me worse the more effort and time I put into the project. And don't be afraid to say no. No is perfectly acceptable, even if you are under contract. We had set up an initial scope of work for a particular topic that I was very well versed in, I was very much on board with. But then they assumed, they never asked, they just simply assumed that I was going to take on this other project that is completely outside of my wheelhouse. I was not the right person to be doing that second project. I was not the right person to be doing that work. I did have the ability to say no, I just didn't. I didn't exercise that ability to implement that boundary, to reject that work, and also reject how they were treating me. Because at that point, I recognized that the relationship was deteriorating. It got significantly worse over the course of that second project. And I had decided about halfway through that project that that was the last project I was going to do with this client. But I did not know at that time how to say no to them. What I want you to do is reevaluate the people you are working with, and making sure that anybody who is no longer providing value, in fact, somebody who is taking away your energy, is no longer in your life. One thing that this client did not do was appreciate the fact that calendars matter, and their involvement in the project at different stages matters. So for example, this particular client expected me to do everything all on my own in the beginning, which, yes, I'm a professional, but we already talked about how I'm not a mind reader, but I did the best I could on my own with essentially no help whatsoever in the beginning and in the middle stages. And then suddenly at the end of the project, they wanted to give assistance, when in fact the assistance that they wanted to give belonged firmly here at the beginning of the project. This particular project required me to do a lot of interviewing of subject matter experts and stakeholders. And that all takes place here in the data gathering stage. They waited until the very end of the project to want to introduce me to people to schedule phone calls with. If they had wanted me to interview specific people, they should have said so, and they should have offered that assistance in the beginning. Another thing in this project is they did not look at the actual calendar, because this was all happening in December. And if you are in the United States, you know that a large portion of the population takes off holiday in December. So they wanted me to call different people and try to schedule interviews as people are out of the office at Christmas time. And you can imagine that's just not going to work out. One of the biggest lessons learned that I am completely shocked as I've been growing my business is the fact that they did not have the proper people, the proper personnel in place to do the proper tasks. So they hired me as a consultant to be a subject matter expert. That meant that I had a specific expertise in what they hired me to do. That is, analyze the emerging new space industry. That is the right thing that they should have hired me for. However, they also had expectations, not necessarily clear at the start of the project, by the way, that I would also be doing all of the graphic design for the project, all of the social media for the project, and all of the communications for the project. Now, at this point, I was in my first year of running Astrolytical. I had not yet hired anybody else. I was working on the company by myself, and they knew it. So they knew it was just me. And they did not think that maybe I should not have been the person, given that my expertise is here in analyzing the space sector, that maybe I was not the best person to be handling graphic design, social media, and communications. Why on earth would they think that somebody should be doing all of this when they are a company that's been around for 2 decades, that presumably should have the revenue to hire people who are experts in these other areas? So as I've been growing my own company this year, this is what puzzles me the most. The reason that this client did it was because they knew they were not paying me extra to do all this other work. They knew they were paying me a flat fee. And unfortunately, my company was not at the point where I could hire out other people to do this work for me. It is at the point right now where that's exactly what I do. When you have somebody who is doing work that is not their expertise, you might save money as a company, but your work is shoddy. And that is what surprises me the most, is that this company was around for so long and is moderately successful doing absolutely shoddy work. Because I can tell you that second project that I should not have taken on because it was not my expertise was not my best work. And it was not going to be as good as somebody who had a subject matter expertise in that area. And that's my biggest lesson learned from this bad client, was that I value quality of the products that I give to my customers and clients over saving a buck and not delegating properly. And finally, treat people with respect. I mean, even if the business relationship does not work out the way you intended, people are still people. And the space sector is still fairly small compared to a lot of other industries. So word gets around. After this client and I mutually agreed to no longer work together, is that I continued to build my business. And this particular client immediately saw that I could become a competitor to them, although I wasn't actually a competitor to them at that time. But they saw that I had that potential, and the CEO of this company immediately swooped in to tell me that I could not run my company that way. I could not encroach upon their work in any possible way. And so they had the nerve to try to tell me how to run my business and to try to tell me that I could not go after the same clientele. And this was not in the contract, by the way. There are some contracts that are written that you cannot compete, and a non-compete clause. That was not in the contract. It was really disrespectful of this CEO to try to tell me how to run my business when we were no longer even working together. Another thing that happened, and I still can't believe this happened, about a year or two later, I can't quite remember the timeline, they contacted me out of nowhere and they wanted to do a follow-up of some of the work that I had done for them. And they wanted me to train the person who had replaced me on this project for free. Yes. I responded back with my rate, and they never contacted me again, of course, but I just had to laugh because it was like one of those double insults of, hey, we're not going to hire you to do this. And by the way, we want you to still work for us to fill in your replacement for free. I'm like, no. A few years later, they actually took on a suggestion of work that I had suggested to them back when I was still working with them. At the time, they had rejected that idea, but several years later, they actually took up that idea and they did a poor job of it. I'm so sad to say. It was a really good idea, but they did not implement it properly, mainly because they didn't have the right person or persons involved in the project. I would have been the right person or persons involved in the project, but there's no way I would have taken on that project because of how that client treated me. Don't think that word is not going to get around, that you treat someone poorly, that you exploit someone, that you do a poor job with your work. Don't think that that's not going to get around, because it does. We tend to trust people word of mouth. And so if somebody is publicly through their marketing saying one thing and then privately colleagues, people who have worked with this company are saying another thing, well, people are going to trust the word of mouth conversations over the marketing. And your business relationships are an extension of your branding. If this is something that resonates with you, if you are a business owner in the space sector and you are looking to grow in space and you're looking to put the best foot forward, you're looking to be reputable and respectable, then please contact me. I'm happy to help you. My company, Astrolytical, helps businesses to grow in the space sector. So please reach out if you have any interest in growing your business in space. Thanks so much.